Round 1 in the playoffs is in the books, and honestly, it went as expected. In every matchup, the higher seed team won, excluding the Red Bulls, but after their playoff history, that wasn't really surprising either. So from 12 teams, we're down to 6, and with 4 games to cover in this round, we'll begin our preview with the first game to be played in the conference semifinal, as in the East, we finally see the first seed make their mark on the postseason as the Philadelphia Union welcomes FC Cincinnati to Subaru Park. Let's be honest, this seems like a story we've seen before. In 2020, the Union lit up the regular season, finished on top of the East, and looked to be favorites for MLS Cup. But in their first game, they came up against a Revolution side that just squeaked into the playoffs, and the Union bowed out. This year, they also lit up the regular season, finished on top of the East, and in my opinion, are favorites for MLS Cup. Now they play a Cincinnati squad who just squeaked into the playoffs on the final day, and we're about to find out if the Union will succumb to their past fate or write a new chapter. I mean, it's hard to think that they'll lose this, right? I mean, we're looking at a Union team who set records for their goal scoring abilities. A team that has the best attack in the league, punching in 72 goals in 34 games. A team that also has the best defense in the league, only allowing 26 goals in 34 games. The Philadelphia Union are just that good, which in a typical world would mean that they're gonna win. But in MLS playoffs, everything is on the table. For Cincinnati, they're coming off their first ever playoff victory in a come-from-behind win against the New York Red Bulls. In that game, things looked bleak for a while, and an unsteady Cincinnati backline gave away multiple opportunities, and a failure to close down Lewis Morgan outside of the box led to a 1-0 deficit right after halftime. But throughout that half too, Cincinnati was also throwing punches New York's way, but it wasn't until the final 15 minutes Cincy responded with Acosta slotting away a penalty and the brilliance of Brandon Vazquez coming up big with 4 minutes left. That's the ability of this Cincinnati squad. They have game changers in Acosta, who leads the league in assists, and Brandon Vazquez, who's had a career season with now 19 goals. These are big players that come up in big games, and in the playoffs, big players who can do magic on their own win these games. But the Union also have their own big players, like Andre Blake, who's almost definitely picking up the Goalkeeper of the Year award after putting in some breathtaking performances and holding down a season-high 15 clean sheets. Or Daniel Gazdag, who's really snuck out of nowhere to be a key figure for this side with 22 goals on the year. And honestly, I can name this whole Union roster as big players, because from Kai Wagner to new signing Julian Carranza to defensive mid Jose Martinez, this team has just got match winners in every position. Throughout the year, the Union picked up many wins, but the only team in the Eastern Conference they could not get 3 points from was Cincinnati. There's something about this Cincy team that puts the Union off their mark. But when the stage is finally set, I think the Union will be ready. Break away that playoff curse, Philadelphia, because I'm picking you with a 2-1 extra time victory. Sticking to Thursday night, we're jumping conferences as we look at the matchup the MLS gods wrote up. It's another edition of El Trafico in the MLS playoffs. The last time we saw this was all the way back in 2019, where the likes of Carlos Vela and Zlatan Ibrahimovic were at their MLS peak. That heated contest ended with a 5-3 scoreline, 4 goals in 15 minutes, and Carlos Vela out on top as Ibrahimovic played his final game in LA. This time around, we have a somewhat similar story, but instead of Ibrahimovic, the Galaxy have a new number 9 ready for his first playoff push in Chicharito. For LAFC, their second half of the year hasn't featured as much glory as their first, and although they came away from the regular season with the Supporters' Shield, their last 9 games featured more losses than they picked up in their first 25 matches. A lot of people correlate that drop in form to the amount of in and outs they experienced during the mid-season transfer window, where we saw LAFC send 4 players out and bring in 4 more with the likes of Bale and Chiellini. At first, it seemed like they would sweep the remainder of the league, but in actuality, there was a very slow integration of the new signings, and the general togetherness of the team seemed to dip. For the Galaxy, they dealt with their first round matchup easily, even though it did come down to 1 goal scored in the 60th minute by an unlikely source of Julian Araujo. The key for the Galaxy in this matchup is not to allow LAFC to close out Chicharito like we saw Nashville do in the first round game. Nashville was able to close Chicharito out of the game almost entirely by not allowing any movement inside their box. And if the Galaxy want to be a real threat in this game, it's gonna ride off Chicharito's off the ball movement. The best thing about Chicharito is that his movement doesn't just put himself in great positions, but it also opens up space for other members of this Galaxy attack. And with Ricky Puig able to drop a pinpoint ball anywhere he likes, LAFC needs to be wary on how they react to the G's attack. This year, LAFC met the Galaxy in 3 separate games, and right now the balance sits in the Galaxy's favor, coming out of those matchups with 2 wins compared to LAFC's 1. But LAFC once again are a team of endless possibilities. Even though Chicho Arango has blanked in his last 4 games, I never count him out, and even if he finds himself on the bench, which I doubt he will, he's known for popping up in crucial moments. Overall, this is the toughest matchup to call because so much rides on this from a fan point of view to a club point of view. Then you add in all the insane events that always occur in El Trafico, it's almost impossible to know what to expect. But because it's my job to make a call, I'm going to take LAFC here with a score of 3-2. And now we go back to the East and look at a 2nd seed versus a 3rd seed in Montreal as they host the defending champions NYCFC. In that first round matchup for Montreal, we saw the dominance and beauty that this Montreal side can play with. Wilfried Nancy has implemented some of the most attractive football we've seen in the playoffs this year. The way this team works the ball out wide, back to the middle, forward, backward, and then back into the action is something to behold. It's possessing the ball with a purpose, and that purpose is to get the ball in dangerous areas. It's still crazy to me that Nancy has created this system using guys that other teams have deemed surplus, like Mihalovic, Kyoto, and Kai Kamara. Against Orlando, Montreal really established themselves in control, and that's how they want to play. For NYCFC, their round 1 game was similar against Inter Miami. Nick Cushing has found a way to work this team around, even without the deadly skills of Tati Castellanos. The team is using their midfield to develop a lot of the attacking movement. For this game against Montreal, all signs are going to be pointing to Thales Magno missing out again due to his injury on decision day. And I don't think Hebert played badly in his place against Miami, but I do think he wasn't as involved as we would have seen a Magno. Now, yes, Hebert did pick up a goal in the final minutes, but to be fair, Miami did just gift him that ball. Going back to City's strengths though, their midfield with the likes of Max Morales, Rodriguez, and Gabriel Pereira pushed this team forward, and every attack flows through them. In NYCFC's first 2 goals against Miami, this is exactly what we saw. These guys playing balls to each other and moving off the ball led to that 2-0 lead. This is where New York can take advantage of Montreal because even though Montreal controls the majority of the ball, the times we have seen them get broken down comes from fast transitional play. For Montreal, their strengths will lie in the guys I mentioned before like Mihalovic and Kamara, but there's also been a new face in Montreal this season who had the winning goal versus Orlando in Ismail Kone. Kone hasn't been lighting the score sheet light this year with only 2 goals and 5 assists, but his presence is felt on the field. Although being young, he brings a sense of stability to this attack, and his composure on his finish the other night shows that. Along with Kone, Montreal may be getting back their leading goal scorer versus New York City, with Kyoto looking to at least play a part in this game. I think it's going to be a tight one, but I'm going to roll with the story of Montreal at home by a 1-0 scoreline. And that brings us to our final game of the 4 and another absolute dream matchup as FC Dallas go on a visit to Q2 Stadium in Austin. Who would have guessed that after both of these teams missed out on the playoffs last season, we would see them meeting in a conference semifinal where I actually think the winner of the West will come from. Now before I dive into Austin FC, let's talk about Dallas. Their round 1 game versus Minnesota was anything but convincing. It was a matchup that went the distance all the way to penalties where it was ended by a Panenka by Alan Velasco. But leading up to that point, this was a back and forth dogfight where I couldn't predict where it would end up. Neither Minnesota or Dallas seemed to want to control this game, and arguably on a coin flip, Dallas emerged. My takeaway from that game was that this Dallas team maybe isn't as prepared as I thought they would be. Jesus Ferreira missed a golden opportunity, and I think it's something that I'm getting used to seeing. Although he's been massive for this team with his 18 goals and Young Player of the Year title, I've often seen him fail in these big moments. But it is still there. I mean, you don't do what he's done this season without the skill. It's just about getting that confidence back after going 6 games without a goal. And to flip it on you, Austin's match against Real Salt Lake left me with the same impression as Dallas did. Maybe Austin isn't ready for these big moments. I know on Twitter, Felipe Martins loves to talk the most outrageous but the fact is, people expected this Austin team to win. I mean, they're the second seed. They were at home and they were favorites. Add on top of that they were playing a 7th seed team who was missing their biggest names and were down a man for an hour. It was not a nice sight to see Austin fail to win in regulation and extra time. Instead, RSL dragged this Austin side to penalties where the amazing Brad Stuver came up huge. For this match, I am worried about Austin's attack because they seem to have no idea how to break down that 10-man RSL. With Sebastian Driussi, Fagundes, and Gite combining to have 32 goals, we need something more than a penalty in the 90th minute to save your season. For this match though, I'd like to think Josh Wolf would have corrected the squad. Yes, they're playing a Dallas team that has the best defense in the West, but when Wolf gets his team attacking how he wants, they score and they score a lot. Being a team with the 3rd most goals in the league. At home, a place where the stands are always filled out, it's going to be a daunting task for Dallas. If Dallas want to succeed, they'll have to control the midfield a ton better than we saw versus Minnesota. On top of that, we need to see the creativeness of Paul Arriola, who played very well in that Minnesota match, actually mount to a goal. They could also do with a much better performance from Velasco, who, other than that chip in the penalty shootout, was not dangerous whatsoever. Both of these teams are coming off a full 120 minutes, so expect some fatigue, but I believe we're in for a lively matchup. I'm going against my bracket here, and I have Austin advancing with a 4-2 scoreline. And that finishes off the conference semifinals. Huge games in the West I'm looking forward to, and all around, I just want to see some goals. Until next week's conference finals, I'll see you next time.